Hi everyone, my name is Delene Sheesby. In March 2020, the Department of Employment and Labour hosted the launch of the new Ergonomics Regulations. These regulations were published in December 2019. The Department of Employment and Labour introduced 3 speakers. In the first presentation, the speaker or a speaker from the Department of Labour rolled out the new regulations. In the second presentation, Dr. Jessica Hutching from the Ergonomic Society of South Africa discussed the implementation of an ergonomics program, and then the final presentation was given by Satunya Mastie, an ergonomist, and she gave us an understanding of ergonomic risk assessments. Let me give you a bit of a background as to why the ergonomics regulations were introduced. It is a sad fact that poor health and safety practices affects not only the employee, but the employer as well. Costs to the employers could include, and not limited to, medical costs and rehabilitation costs. Being laid off work due to an injury could result in an employee losing his income or her income. The Department of Employment and Labour have never accepted that injury and diseases go with the job. Section 8 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. General duties of the employers to their employees. Every employer must, as far as reasonably practicable, ensure that the working environment in which the employees are working is safe and without risk to the health and safety of those people. Section 8.2d further requires that the employer must establish what the hazards are relating to the work in that workplace or the tasks in that workplace. And once established, precautionary measures must be implemented. The regulations include the following, and I will discuss each one individually. Starting off, we have the definitions. Going on to the scope of the application, what is required as far as information, instruction, and training is concerned, the duties of persons who may be at risk of the exposure to ergonomic risks, duties of designers, manufacturers, importers, and suppliers, ergonomic risk assessment, how to control, medical surveillance, if applicable, maintenance of those controls, keeping of records, technical committees, and then finally, if not complied with, offences and penalties. The Act uses certain terminology and phrases, and the definitions describe the meanings thereof. This definition, adverse health effect, it says, means the causation, promotion, facilitation, or exacerbation of a structural or functional abnormality, with the implication that the abnormality produces has the potential of lowering the quality of life, contributing to a disabling illness, or leading to premature death. So what does that mean? What is the definition of adverse health effect? We would look at the workplace or the different task areas and say, well, what would cause a functional or structural abnormality? Left not corrected, what would be the implications? Would it be lowering the quality of life? Or could it contribute to a disabling illness or a disease or even premature death? Competent person, with regards to ergonomics and the work or task to be performed, that person will be required to have ergonomics training, experience, and, where applicable, specific ergonomic qualifications and training. The training must be registered in terms of the provision of the NQF Act, the National Qualifications Framework Act, and must be familiar with the Act and applicable regulations. Ergonomics means the scientific discipline concerned with the fundamental understanding of interactions among humans and other elements of a system, and the profession that applies theory, principles, data, and methods to design in order to optimize human well-being and overall system performance. So what is a work system? A work system is in which humans or machines participate and perform work using the information, technology, and other resources to produce products or services for internal or external customers. An ergonomic risk is a characteristic or action in the workplace conditions, or a combination thereof that may impair overall system performance and human well-being. So the Ergonomic Risk Assessment is a program, the process, and the investigation to identify, analyze, evaluate, and prioritize any risk from exposure to ergonomic risks associated with that workplace. So these regulations will apply to A, any employer or self-employed person who carries out work at a workplace where there might be persons who might be exposed to ergonomic risks. Or B, a designer, manufacturer, importer, or supplier of machinery, plant, or work systems for use at a workplace. Instruction, information, and training. Firstly, the employer must, after consultation with the Health and Safety Committee, establish all persons who may be affected or potentially exposed to ergonomic risks in order to design and implement a training program that incorporates the following. A, the content and scope of these regulations. They need to share what the contents and scope of the regulations are. B, the potential sources of exposure to ergonomic risks, all the different tasks, all the different jobs, which ones may potentially be exposed to ergonomic risks. C, the nature of ergonomic risks. D, the potential risk to health associated with that ergonomic risk. E, if there would be any control measures that are in place to prevent the exposure to ergonomic risks. F, the procedure for reporting ergonomic risks to the health and safety rep or the employer. How do they go about it? Is there a procedure in place? G, the precautions to be taken by an employee to protect himself or herself against ergonomic risks. They must understand that they too would need to take responsibility for their own safety. And H, the assessment of exposures, the necessity for medical surveillance and long-term benefits of undergoing such surveillance. If medical surveillance is required, assessment needs to be done, and when and how often medical surveillance needs to be performed, and what the long-term benefits would be of a medical surveillance program. Point 2. The employer must conduct the training prior to the placement of the relevant employee in the workplace. Before that employee starts performing the task, the employer must have already trained that person. Point number 3, the employer must conduct a refresher training at intervals that may be recommended by the Health and Safety Committee. Discuss with the committee and discuss how regularly refresher training must be performed. Duties of those at risk. Any person who has now been identified or who may be exposed to ergonomic risks must obey any lawful instruction given to him or her by the employer or self-employed person, or anyone authorized by the employer or self-employed person. First of all, A, the use of measures adopted to control ergonomic risks. If measures have been adopted, they must comply. They have to carry out those measures. B, cooperation with the employer in determining the employee's exposure to ergonomic risks. C, the reporting of potential ergonomic risks. They must report if they potentially identify any further or unknown ergonomic risks to health and safety representatives or the employer. D, reporting for medical surveillance as required by Regulation 8, and information, instruction and training received as contemplated in the previous Regulation number 3. It is the duty of designers, manufacturers, importers and suppliers, as far as reasonably practicable, to ensure that machinery, plant or work systems optimize human well-being and overall system performance. And B, as far as reasonably practicable, they must supply machinery, plant or work systems that can be transported, can be received or stored and handled in a manner that optimizes human well-being and overall system performance. And C, they too must provide information, instruction and training as deemed necessary to allow potential users, other people, to achieve optimum human well-being and overall system performance during the use of machinery, plant or work systems. And then D, as far as reasonably practicable, they must install the machinery, plant or work systems to achieve optimum human well-being and overall system performance. And finally, E, provide the information to potential users on the appropriate maintenance of machinery, plant or work systems to ensure safe operation and use. After consultation with the Occupational Health and Safety Committee or the Health and Safety representatives, the employer must, before commencement of any work that may expose the employees to ergonomic risks, have an ergonomic risk assessment performed by a competent person. The ergonomic risk assessment must be conducted at intervals not exceeding 2 years. And B, it must also include a complete hazard identification. The identification of all persons who may be affected by the ergonomic risks. How employees may be affected by the ergonomic risks. And then the analysis and the evaluation of the ergonomic risks and the prioritization of ergonomic risks. And that's not the end. The ergonomic risk assessment must be reviewed, A, if that assessment is no longer valid, or B, the control measures found at that time are no longer effective, or C, technology or scientific advances allow for more effective control measures, and D, there might have been changes in the work methods, the type of work carried out, or the type of equipment used to control the exposure. And E, maybe an incident has occurred, or medical surveillance has revealed an adverse health effect where ergonomic risks are identified as the contributing factor. The employer or self-employed person must ensure that the exposure of a person to ergonomic risk is prevented or, as far as reasonably practicable, at least adequately controlled. And point number 2, in order to comply with point number 1, an employer or self-employed person must, as far as reasonably practicable, remove or reduce the exposure to the ergonomic risk by implementing control measures in accordance with the hierarchy of controls. Some identified ergonomic risks might require a medical surveillance program, So the employer must ensure that an employee who is placed under the medical surveillance must be overseen by an occupational medicine practitioner if, for example, the ergonomic risk assessment indicates the need for the employee to be placed under medical surveillance, or B, an occupational health practitioner recommends that relevant employees must be under medical surveillance, in which case the employer may call upon an occupational medicine practitioner to ratify the appropriateness of such recommendations. Where medical surveillance is required, the employer must make sure that in the case of new employees, an initial health examination before employee commences employment must be done within 30 days of commencement of such employment. And B, a periodic health examination informed by the Ergonomic Risk Assessment at intervals specified by an occupational medicine practitioner, but not exceeding 2 years. And an exit health examination informed by the Ergonomic Risk Assessment. Control measures must be maintained. Every employer or self-employed person must, as far as reasonably practicable, ensure that any control provided for the benefit of employees comply with these regulations. Ensure that it is fully and appropriately implemented and is maintained in good working order. The section on records lists the required times or periods that records must be kept by the employer. For training, the period is as long as the employee is employed. Kept by the health and safety rep, the committee member or inspector. Ergonomic risk assessments must be kept for a period of 40 years. Health and safety reps, committee members, inspectors' involvement. Risk control for 3 years. Medical surveillance, 40 years. Maintenance of controls, 3 years. An ergonomic health and safety committee consists of a chairperson, ideally 2 Department of Employment and Labour officials, 3 from employers' organizations, 3 from employees' organization, 1 from a professional body recognized by the Chief Inspector, 1 from a higher education institute, 1 representing occupational medicine, 1 co-opted member. Duties are to advise and make recommendations to the Chief Inspector. The current Occupational Health and Safety Act is under review. However, the offences and penalties are similar to the current Occupational Health and Safety Act, being this regulation, the offences in terms of the Ergonomic Regulation, instruction, information and training, duties of those exposed, duties of designers, manufacturers, importers and suppliers, ergonomic risk assessment, risk control, medical surveillance, records. For non-compliance, for not having the above, 12 months imprisonment, or 200 or 1 additional day imprisonment per day for continuous offences. So please note, for your next audit, whenever that may take place, this ergonomic regulation will be included in your audit. So start implementing this regulation and complying with this regulation now. Now that we have a better understanding of the ergonomics regulation, we must now, according to the legislation, implement an ergonomics program. In her presentation, Dr. Jessica Hutching, the president of the Ergonomics Society of South Africa, discussed the 3 domains of ergonomics and exactly what an ergonomic program entails. she discussed the implementation and elements of an effective program. I bring to you Dr. Jessica Hutching's presentation. As per the definitions, ergonomics is the scientific discipline concerned with the understanding of interactions among humans and other elements of a system. The profession that applies theory, principles, data and methods to design in order to optimize human well-being and overall system performance. So, ergonomics assists in optimizing or creating a balance between humans and systems or things with which they interact. Applying ergonomics requires a broad understanding of the full scope of the discipline. It promotes a holistic approach, and it considers factors such as physical, cognitive, social, organizational, environmental, or other. Ergonomics is an approach or a solution to the workplace problems. The three domains of specialization within the discipline of ergonomics are: the first domain is of physical ergonomics, where persons in our workplace might encounter ergonomic risks relating to working postures, or the handling of materials, or repetitive motions or movements, or work-related musculoskeletal disorders, or even workplace layouts, or health and safety. These are all actually the physical ergonomics. Cognitive ergonomics are not as obvious as physical ergonomics. In cognitive ergonomics, we would look at mental processes, perception, memory, reasoning, and motor responses, all of which might affect interactions among humans and other elements of the system. Topics including mental workload, decision-making, skilled performance, human-computer interaction, human reliability, work stresses, and training, as these may relate to human system design. However, although there are three domains, we cannot look at each of these domains in isolation. The value is achieved when we look at it from a holistic view of human beings and their interaction within a system that includes tools and tasks and environments. So what is an ergonomics program? It is a holistic, multidisciplinary systems approach for anticipating, identifying, analyzing, mitigating, and reviewing ergonomic risks. Engages the three domains, but the primary focus is the system: physical, cognitive, and organizational, integrated into existing occupational health and safety management systems. It becomes part of your health and safety system. It is the proactive management of ergonomics. It must be viewed as a strategic, continuous improvement process, makes a positive impact on the entire business. Your health and safety foundation must already be strong in order for an ergonomics program to be built thereon and succeed. There needs to be a very clear understanding of what ergonomics is, how ergonomics transforms an entire organization, or how the organization can audit their own ergonomic practices, the importance of an ergonomic management system. Is there value in an ergonomics program? Absolutely. Matching the job demands to the capabilities and needs of your workforce. What is the value in that? This is good for well-being of your staff, and therefore it's good for your business. What about staff work more safely and efficiently, leading to fewer injuries, of course, and accidents? Ergonomic risks can impair human well-being and overall system performance. So with an ergonomics program, these are controlled and managed effectively and continuously. Better experience for the user. This is good for business. It's good for people, which makes it better lives and better workplace. So value of ergonomics lies in investing and developing a strong practice. In developing an ergonomics program, everyone in the organization, from top down and bottom up, needs to know what ergonomics is and how it is beneficial. If we were to identify 4 characteristics of companies who have successfully empowered ergonomics programs, we would find, number 1, ergonomics is implemented as part of a comprehensive occupational health and safety approach. Number 2, ergonomics is managed as a continuous improvement process. Number 3, ergonomics is given the support and resources it needs to succeed. And number 4, ergonomics engages the organization, top down and bottom up. When developing your ergonomics program, don't compartmentalize your workplace. Your ergonomics program must form part of your initial occupational health and safety management system. Work on the concept of the ISO 9001, 45001, the Plan, Do, Check, Act principles. And of course, it must always be based on a continuous improvement system. Your leadership must be genuine. They must be accountable, and they must support the need for the program and ensure that it will succeed. It's not just a thing of doing ergonomics. Use your existing management system for the ergonomics data. Commitment is key and is needed for the entire workforce to build a better workplace. Base this on a participatory approach. Develop appropriate policies and procedures to manage your ergonomics. Develop education and awareness programs and training so that the existing ergonomic risks are made clear to everyone in the organization. From your ergonomics risk assessments, identify the requirements for medical surveillance programs so that you can adequately identify and manage the effects of those ergonomic risks. The culture of managing ergonomic risks needs to be rolled out and applied by all stakeholders within the organization. The program must eventually become self-sustaining. In order for your ergonomics program to be successful and sustainable, you really need to know exactly where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow. Identify what the current situation is, perhaps by means of an audit, before you establish your Plan, Do, Check, Act. Seek clarity and alignment from all stakeholders and identify actionable improvement opportunities. Thereafter, create a customized ergonomic management system. This defines your ergonomic process. So from your audit, you will have actionable information which you can use to create your EMS. And as per your occupational health and safety processes, ergonomics must be managed in a well-defined system. Your EMS should be documented. You need to have policies. You need to know why. You need to have standards, what you need to do, and guidance documents, how to do it, how to reduce your ergonomic risks in your workplace. Your EMS policies need to reflect your goals and vision of the ergonomics program for the organization and the employees. You need to identify engineering, design, manufacturing departments are part of and involved in the EMS and the prevention and improvements. Proaction and participation, these are the approaches that drive your ergonomics risk reduction. Ergonomics program must make a positive impact on the entire business. The 5 important elements for an effective ergonomics program are as follows. Number 1, leadership and stakeholder engagement. This must be based on a participatory approach. Good planning. Number 3, hazard identification and prevention. Number 4, education and awareness. And number 5, continuous improvement. The engagement of your leadership and stakeholders is a very important element. Without their commitment, resources for the workplace and workstation improvements, training, and holding people accountable for results, the program will not succeed. Define their roles and responsibilities. Communicate them to everyone. Have cross-functional teams. Teams which require the support of top leadership. Communicate management commitment through written policies, participation in committees, and allocate appropriate resources. If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. If it cannot be measured, it cannot be managed. Identify your objectives and your goals. Number 1, to reduce musculoskeletal disorders. Or 2, to improve safety and productivity. And 3, to increase training on ergonomics. Establish key performance areas and key performance indicators. Get SMART goals. Ergonomic hazards must be identified and prevented. The ergonomic risk assessments, understanding the ergonomic workplace and the workplace risks, must be done. This will be dealt in the next presentation. Effective reporting of potential ergonomic risks by employees to employer must be implemented. Risk map and priority listings, developing countermeasures, monitoring and reviews, all to become part of that element. Establish an ergonomic training matrix so that you know who needs to do training, what training they need to do, and when the training needs to take place. The type of training that they might require is what an ergonomic hazard and a risk is. What are the potential sources of exposure to the ergonomic risks? What are the potential risks to health associated with ergonomic risks? What is the procedure for reporting ergonomic risks to the employer? What precautions to take to ensure protection against ergonomic risks? What are mitigation methods and the hierarchy of controls? These are all various training interventions that need to take place. Would they be classroom or would they be on-the-job training? Would we need to provide an assessment of understanding? How do we store training records? The final element of the effective ergonomics program is that of continuous improvement. We need to monitor our objectives. We need to review our performances and revise if necessary. We need to implement an annual plan, a 5-year plan, and continuously seek new ways of improving. For example, ergonomic opportunities identified and corrected, reduction of our musculoskeletal disorder risk factors or cognitive risks, for example, burnout, employee perception surveys, and training. In conclusion, ergonomics is a system discipline. The program needs to ensure that the holistic view of the organization is considered. We need to focus on the interactions of people with their tools, their tasks, technology within that environment. And everyone needs to be involved, from top down and bottom up. The program is not a once-off. It's a strategic, continuous improvement process, and it must make a positive impact on the entire business. The final presentation was delivered by the ergonomist Mastie, who introduced the ergonomic risk assessments. This is a very important topic and must be understood so that risk assessments must be completed so that we can determine the effects of the existing ergonomic risks on employees in our workplace. This will make it possible for us to prioritize the risks and to mitigate them. The primary objective of an ergonomic risk assessment is to identify, evaluate, and analyze the ergonomic risks. An ergonomic risk assessment is the responsibility of the competent person to conduct the ergonomic assessment, who will identify, analyze, and evaluate all the relevant ergonomic risk factors, whether they are organizational, cognitive, or physical. There are certain actions or conditions or a combination thereof in our workplace which may result in injury or strain, which may eventually impair human well-being. Some of these actions or workplace conditions include, now on the slide, there is a table which lists various tasks or activities which relate to physical risk factors. For example, working in an awkward posture, or bending, or compression, or contact stress, or forceful exertions, insufficient rest breaks, lifting of heavy equipment or items, pushing or pulling heavy loads, reaching overhead, repetitive motions, static or sustained postures, or even vibrations. These all fall under physical risk factors. Quite different to physical risks are tasks or activities which relate to cognitive risk factors, which is that of the mind. For example, complex or unfamiliar tasks, sustained attention tasks, monotonous, repetitive tasks, cognitive workload, excessive memory demands, divided attention tasks. Our environment may also present with physical or social related ergonomic risks. For example, noise or temperature. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? What is the ventilation like? Is there poor or substandard lighting? Chemicals or dust exposure? Poor layout or housekeeping, uneven surfaces? Lack of control of work, lack of autonomy, poor communication, lack of participation in decisions, bullying, lack of social interaction during work. Technology or tool-related risk factors can also impose ergonomic risks upon us in our workplace. For example, poorly designed tools, tools that do not fit for the purpose, tools or technology which is not suited for use in the South African workforce, lack of PPE or poorly designed or maintained PPE, poor design of visual displays. Not surprisingly, our work organization characteristics or our work methods may also intensify ergonomic workplace risks. Some of these actions and or workplace conditions could include inadequate work rest cycles, excessive workplace and or duration, lack of task variability, piece rate, machine-paced work, inadequate rest, unaccustomed work, disruptive working times, night shift work, early morning work, extended shifts, on-call work, extended working weeks, poorly designed shift combinations. These can all be or become organizational risk factors. The Ergonomic Risk Assessment, the ERA, must assess the interactions amongst the humans and other elements of the system so that we can identify and determine what is or what is not acceptable for optimum human well-being and the overall system performance. The ERA determines the level of ergonomic risk present in that job or task or workplace under evaluation and present a clear view of the ergonomic risk present in the workplace. Only by quantifying ergonomic risk factors can a plan to prioritize and implement measurable workplace improvement be developed. A clear understanding of the ergonomic risks enable the effective communication, prioritization, and implementation of workplace improvements. As such, the ERAs are a backdrop for any ergonomic improvement efforts that an organization employs. The important purpose of the ergonomic risk assessment is to identify the ergonomic deficits, hazards, stresses, and risks in a workplace, and can be used to predict the possible effects of working conditions on human well-being and overall system performance. It can also be used to improve performance, job satisfaction, and efficiency. It can be used to identify or specify training and interventions required to manage the risks identified. It can certainly be used to reduce the potential for workplace injury and ill health and reduce the potential for accidents at work. According to 6.1 of the Ergonomic Regulation, the ergonomic risk assessment must be done before the commencement of any work that may expose employees to ergonomic risks, and of course to be done by a competent person. The ergonomic risk assessment must also be discussed in consultation with the Health and Safety Committee established in respect of that workplace under the employer's control or the health and safety representatives designated for that particular workplace. Regulation 6.2 stipulates that the ergonomic risk assessment must be conducted at intervals not exceeding 2 years and must include a complete hazard identification, the identification of all persons who may be affected by the ergonomic risks, and how employees may be affected by the ergonomic risks, the analysis and evaluation of the ergonomic risks, and the prioritization of the ergonomic risks. Regulation 6.3 requires us to review the relevant ergonomic risk assessment. If such assessment is no longer valid or control measures are no longer effective, technology or scientific advances may have changed, which allows more effective control methods. There might have been a change in the work method or the type of work carried out, the type of equipment used, or maybe an incident has occurred. in which case the ergonomic risk assessment must be reviewed. To complete the hazard identification, you may start with a worksite tour. In this tour, you might want to evaluate all aspects of the work and include non-routine activities such as maintenance, repair or cleaning, and then assess the physical work environment, equipment, materials, products, etc. that are used. You might want to observe work activities and how the tasks are done, noting how work is organized. Then you might inspect injury and incident records, room or work area plans, sickness absence reports, health surveillance reports, personnel records, etc. Then you might note the way the work is organized and systems in place. Interview and distribute questionnaires to workers, that would work. And then assess all shifts, design methods and people who work off-site, either at home, on other job sites, drivers, teleworkers with clients, etc. Completing the hazard identification process has its benefits. Conducting a worksite tour enables one to identify all the tasks where an employee is exposed to ergonomic risks so that an ergonomic risk assessment can be conducted on those tasks. A job hazard analysis, in addition to the worksite tour, can be used at this stage of the assessment process to screen for ergonomic hazards at the job level. Once these tasks and these work areas, work environments where employees are exposed to ergonomic risks have been identified, a simple risk assessment may also be used to identify and document levels of risk exposure. A simple risk assessment can also provide an ergonomics assessor with a list of tasks for further evaluation using an objective tool. A hazard identification can be done at the following intervals: during design and implementation, before tasks are done, while tasks are being done, during inspection, after incidences. In the second step, the ergonomic risk assessor will identify the persons who will be affected by those ergonomic risks. During the worksite tour, job hazard analysis and simple risk assessments, once they have been conducted, the ergonomic risk assessor will be able to identify existing ergonomic risks and the persons affected by those risks. The ergonomic risk assessor is likely to successfully identify persons affected by ergonomic risks by pinpointing the people who work in those specific job levels or areas, in those environments or the workplaces where the ergonomic risks were documented. The ergonomic risk assessor would likely also note the groups of people that may have a different level of risk because or due to their experience level, health status, or physical condition such as young or inexperienced workers, persons with disabilities, or new or expectant mothers. Thirdly, the effects of the ergonomic risks on employees can be determined after the hazards and risks have been identified, examined, and assessed, because they can result in injury or fatigue or discomfort, lower back pain, CTSs, poor performance, increased error or rejection rate, absenteeism. The extent of the effect will depend on the task variety, duration of exposure, frequency of exposure, and the interaction effects. So we have identified the hazards. We have then identified the persons who might be affected by those ergonomic risks, and then determined the effects of those risks on employees. So on this slide, we would need to analyze and evaluate those risks. There are a variety of ergonomic analysis methods that exist. However, the different analysis methods tend to focus on different aspects and employ different approaches. Every analysis and evaluation of ergonomic risks should ideally be conducted from an objective point of view. The analysis and evaluation of ergonomic risks should include clearly detailed task or job requirements. An analysis and evaluation may be conducted on tasks, work layout design, job design, environment, or for resources involved. Ideally, an ergonomic assessor will then select a relevant risk assessment tool or tools. Then a complete job-specific risk checklist and task analysis to examine employee exposure in the workplace and provide accurate qualitative information about the ergonomic risk present in a particular task can be conducted. An analysis and evaluation of the ergonomic risk can also be conducted using several other tools. Obviously, prioritization of the ergonomic risks will depend on the severity of the identified risks. Workplaces with the most severe risks should be managed first, followed by the less severe risks. Identified risks must remain limited to ensure optimum human well-being and overall system performance. There is no universal assessment method or tool that can be applied to all tasks, jobs, and workplaces. The appropriate tool or method must be selected, so your ergonomic risk assessment tool may vary. Some are quantitative and others are qualitative. Some are generic, some are designed for a specific job. Ergonomic assessment methods exist as checklists, posture-based analysis tools, cognitive-based analysis tools, biomechanics-based analysis tools, multi-aspect analysis, etc. Each assessment method has its limitations. It's very important to understand that providing tools without proper training can lead to more harm than good. So the majority of ergonomic assessment tools require some knowledge or some type of training. It is not appropriate for use by those with little or no training. In conclusion, ergonomic risk assessments are conducted to identify, evaluate, and analyze ergonomic risks. Ergonomic risk assessments are useful for reducing workplace injuries and accidents, as well as improving performance, job satisfaction, and efficiency. Ergonomic risk assessments must be conducted before the commencement of any work that may expose employees to ergonomic risks by a competent person. Ergonomic risk assessments must be conducted and reviewed every 2 years and recorded, and they must include a complete hazard identification, the identification of persons affected by the ergonomic risks, a determination on the effects of ergonomic risks on employees, an analysis and evaluation of ergonomic risks, and prioritization of ergonomic risks. This example of a task shows a worker stacking bags, 20-kilogram bags, from one pallet to a pallet in front. So he reaches across, he lifts the bag, he twists his body, he places the bag on the pallet. He stands upright, he reaches across, and then he picks up another bag, twists, turns, bends forward, and places the bag on top of the pallet. And this continues. So the ergonomic risks involved here involves reaching and bending and lifting or manually handling. As mentioned before, there are many different risk assessment methods or tools we can use. This particular risk assessment tool is provided and thanks to Ergonomics. So on the left-hand side, we capture all the details of the employee. He's a male, he's 45, he's been there for a year, he weighs 75 kilograms, his height is 168, his BMI is 26.57. We then time the task. It takes him or took him 5 minutes to destack a certain amount of bags from one pallet to the other. There is a reach involved. He reaches 78 centimeters across to pick up bags from the top pallet. And then also he has a horizontal stretch as well. How often was this done? 25 times. He moved 25 bags. His average heart rate, the weight of the load is 20 kilograms. There is some twisting involved. There are no handles on the bag, and there's no crouching. And then, of course, at the top, the temperature. This tool automatically calculates, and you will see all the red areas, all the identified risks. For example, the L5 to S1 discs are at risk of compression force and poses a high risk as it is above the NIOSH safe lifting recommendation. His reach poses a high risk. We need to reduce the reach. Vertical displacement poses a high risk. Frequency poses a high risk. So all of these are automatically reflected on this particular tool. Choose your tools carefully and get the correct training. Learn about ergonomics. Learn about how to identify ergonomic risks in your workplace, so that you can find solutions to those risks, so that in the long run, you, your employees, and your company will benefit.